Hardy. I run the ABM programme for the Global Services division of BT. There's 18 lovely, incredibly talented marketeers that work in our organisation spread across the globe, focusing on around 800 accounts globally. And these are the top 800 accounts, the ones where the biggest deals are. And basically, for those that don't know, what we do in BT, Global Services Division, is we focus on massive, complex communications platforms that enable these distributed organisations to work better, to communicate better, to compete better. And when Joel asked me to come and present on the connection between marketing and sales, marketing and sales don't get on, tend to sort of cats and dogs is the usual sort of analogy. I thought it was really appropriate because our team has reformed. BT has been playing with ABM off and on, been sort of flirting with it over the last 10 years, and we've come back to a resurgence of it. So in January, we started a new ABM program. We brought together a disparate group of marketeers spread globally, and we made them into ABMers. And the first thing that comes up for that team is this question about how do I actually go and talk to the salespeople, because they're not interested, they're busy, they're running around in like headless chickens, and I can't get space, I can't get airtime with them. So I thought, well, I've been going through the process of doing this, so I've got a prime opportunity to come to you and tell you how we're doing it, because I'm actually sharing this sort of information at the same time with my colleagues, my ABM colleagues in BT. And I want to take you on a bit of a journey of my first experience of being in ABM and working with a new team of salespeople. And this idea that when I took the role on working with this new sales team, the biggest challenge they had was having time for me to do anything positive and proactive with them. And basically, I'd just come back, so this is going back to 2012, around June time, and I just started with this new team. I'd just come back, I'd been off work for a few months with having had a back operation, so I just literally came back into a reorganised organisation, and my boss said to me, we need to go and work with this new team. And from that point, 6 months later, I sat down with him and said, look, I've got a major problem here. Why don't the salespeople like me? And it was a real sort of coming together moment of actually saying, whatever I try, nothing seems to work. So just to go back in time to June, so I'd just come back from back operation, fresh back into BT, and I got this email from my boss. And it basically said, welcome back, there's a new team being formed called New Business Acquisition. So these were the hunters going after these big new opportunities. They've asked for someone from marketing, which sounds ominous. And then the final thing that Ralph said to me was, good luck. So there you go. So who are this wonderful team? There they are. They formed at the beginning of, middle beginning of January. They were the best of the best. Now, John is he's the second from the left there, just under the B, and he is one of the best salespeople that I've ever met. He is hard-nosed, he is aggressive, he doesn't suffer fools lightly, and he is in massive demand. He pulled together that team of people, and you can see the one with the hair in the middle there, that's me, and I had black hair in those days, and this is what 6 years of ABM will do to you if you haven't worked that one out yet already. They had a £1 billion challenge, so they are working with accounts which have opportunities around the 50 to 100 million pounds in size. These are massively complicated organisations to work with. Between them, they've got over 100 years of sales experience. Now you can see the guys on the either side there, they don't look more than they've just left school, so it shows you quite how old John is in that picture as well. So, and then obviously me in that team as well. And I really did feel like the hen in the fox house, and it was a very daunting experience to start with that team. So, what are the sort of accounts that they were working with, and why were they so complicated? And this is true then, and it's the same for the ABM team I'm looking after at the moment. It's exactly the same sort of target audience. Global multinational corporates. They have multiple divisions. So some of them will have one big division, others will have literally hundreds of divisions working under their brand. They're multi-regional, they operate globally in different territories with different political groups and so on and so forth. And that means that the decision-making profile of these people is typically global. But the buying behaviours for these accounts is fundamentally different in each account. Some are centralised, there's one person making the buying decisions for the IT solution. Others, it's based on a regional basis. In others, yet it's based on the different divisions of the business and the subdivisions and so on and so forth. And you can actually get chaotic situations where these accounts are buying different IT from different suppliers and hoping the whole thing will work together. And this is where BT comes in and tries to make things better for those organisations. Internal politics, as you can well guess, is a massive challenge around those things. The one thing that's true for all of these 800 accounts, though, is they're all striving for transformation. They cannot keep on doing things the way they've always been doing it. They're typically focused very much on budget constraints. I'm sure you've all, in marketing we're focused with budget constraints all the time. It's totally true of the IT organisations within these massive transformational organisations as well. They're getting competition from strange places. This is the Ubers, this is the Amazons, this is all sorts of organisations that are coming and nibbling at their toes and taking their lunch from them. And the one thing that it all boils down to is that all these organisations need to become more agile to compete. And that's what we try to do, is to actually bring them technology services which will actually help them to do that. So that's a bit of a sort of a show of what that team was focusing on, what we were focusing on in those days. And at some point we had our first team meeting, and I rushed into London. It's about 10 minutes late, panicking about having this meeting with these very nasty salespeople, and sat down. And when it came to my slot on the agenda, the conversation went a little bit like this. We need to be doing ABM in these accounts. And I talked quite voluminously about, how important ABM was. And I got this sort of feedback, sort of like, well, what exactly does that look like? Hostile reaction to this suggestion. And I started talking about the campaigns that we've got and all these wonderful tools that we could bring to focus on these accounts. And the thing that came back to me was, how much work is that going to be for my team? What is the expectation on my team? How much time will this take? Clearly, they didn't see the value of what I was presenting to them. So over the next 6 months, things went from bad to bad. And these are some of the conversations that I had, the emails that were sent to me in response, the text messages I got, and in a few instances, messages on post-it notes with bricks thrown through my office window. And the one thing that came back time and time, so just a quick show of hands, have you had conversations with salespeople like this? And a show of hands of how familiar some of this stuff is. Okay, so I'm not alone then. It wasn't me just getting it wrong, which is good. But this thing about time came back time and time again. And that was my first major learning. Salespeople, time is a precious commodity. If you don't have something really tangible to bring to them, which has a good use of their time and will help them with their targets, they're not going to give you the time of day. So, after about 6 months of this, I sat down with my boss, Ralph, and said, so, things are going okay, I think. This is the sort of stuff I'm doing. I'm taking campaigns from the central marketing organisation, I'm feeding through the sales channels into these top accounts. I'm providing, I'm there day in, day out with the salespeople at the pointy end, talking to customers, talking to sales with customers, taking the assets that we've got and tailoring them to actually be more specific to the customers and to try and get a bit more traction with them, finding new contacts, searching LinkedIn, looking at all the usual sources, using agencies, loading them diligently onto our CRM system, and basically taking the marketing strategies that we've been given from the central marketing organisation and twisting and tailoring them to meet the needs of the sales community. And this really boiled down to me working where the sales team were. I was in the trenches with them day in, day out, making the agenda look pretty, making sure we were on brand with everything, making sure that the slide presentations were really sort of glossy and carried the brand well and were really clear on their messaging, and facilitating the customer engagements. Now, this unfortunately goes down to, are the sandwiches going to turn up on time? Are there enough golf umbrellas to go around? All that sort of good sort of stuff that we marketeers love to do. And that's ominous. I realised quite quickly that the problem was that I was actually working at the bottom of the sales funnel. I was in the trenches with salespeople doing field-based marketing. And I had a bit of a moment of clarity. And I thought, these guys are just not getting ABM. They don't understand it. I'm not communicating it well. What I'm doing wrong here is I'm just going to them and saying, you need to do ABM. I'm not selling it to them. And so I decided I was going to do an ABM plan to deliver the ABM program to the sales team. And it looked very, very high level. It looked something like this. And I went through some basic ABM processes about looking at, what are the targets? My targets were over here, sales targets over there. So this ABM program needed to have at least 80% of the targets aligned to theirs. We succeed or we fail together. Who are the decision makers? What do I know about them? What do they think and need? How is my marketing program my ABM program actually going to satisfy that? How do I go about engaging them? Now, this is the sort of how do I have that initial conversation, say this is the program we want to do, and have that stick, and more on that later on. But going on, how do we actually keep them motivated and maintained in what we're doing as a team? So the team agenda, making sure you're in the middle of the meeting, and this is a key piece of advice for you. Do not go on an agenda for a sales team as the last slot, because it always gets bumped off. So, try and be in the middle of it. How do I add value? How do I actually bring the quality of this massive marketing ecosystem behind me in BT and focus it on that account? How do I, insight, we've heard lots of people talk about insight, it's absolutely key, but making that insight relevant and tangible to the salespeople is really key. And ultimately then, how do we measure the success and feed that back? So, the problem was that I had this great plan, and I'd shared it with my marketing colleagues, and they said, this is great, this is really going to work, Adrian. But the problem was, I was still speaking in marketing, and I needed to learn to speak sales. And so I went to some colleagues in HR and said, help, what do I do? And there was some discussion about all the things you could do. And somebody said, look at Myers-Briggs. Why don't you actually look at the personality types and see what the overlaps and differences are? So I went and did some research. And the research, there's tons of it out there. And a lot of it's contradictory, and some of it's supporting, and so on and so forth. So after a lot of work, I came up with this sort of generalization that marketing have two things in common with sales and two things that are different. So I just want to trip through those very quickly. So we're both extroverts and we're both intuitive. Does that resonate with everyone here? Okay, so from an extrovert perspective, we like talking and interacting. That's what marketers do, that's what salespeople do. As intuitive types, we look a lot about what meaning is, and we very much focus on insight. So those are two things, there's common ground between us. But the interest comes in the differences. And here we've got the third of the three spectra, and that is the thinking and feeling. Sales are thinking, marketing is feeling. No real surprise there. But the interesting thing is that salespeople like objective and logical principles, whereas us marketeers, we like causes and personalization and thinking about motives and things like that. So it's the quantitative versus the qualitative stuff. And then the fourth area is around judging and perception. Sales being very much in the judging space, they like facts presented on spreadsheets, they like data, they like to be able to analyse and poke things. Whereas marketeers, we like to be in flexible, shared learning environments, we like exciting ideas and things like that. So I can come along with an exciting idea and people sort of, whoa, look at this, is great. And they will turn around and go, yeah, but where's the spreadsheet, where's the facts, Adrian? So this was great, it was a fantastic piece of research and a very interesting process to go through. But what that taught me was I knew how to say, to convince this plan to the salespeople, but I still didn't really know what to say. So I went back and did a bit more research, talking to some of my other ABM colleagues, salespeople and things like that, and looked at what I would call the problem. The problem was simply this. What I was doing was field-based marketing. What they wanted was account-based marketing. So the reason that I was bored out of my mind and really angry about not having my skills used was because I was operating over here. I was being helpful, not being successful. So just to run through a couple of those things. Campaign-led. Instead of actually taking a campaign and saying, we need to funnel this through into the accounts, go back to the campaign engine and say, we need a campaign that looks like this. Instead of being a support for sales, to actually step up and be in partnership with the consultants, the sales specialists and the sales team, all who focus around the account itself. Instead of tailoring generic assets, go back into the engine and say, make me some assets which specifically work for my account. Instead of finding new contacts and just sticking them on a system to just go cold and rot quietly, engage them with something. The move from marketing strategies that deliver marketing results, I turn up to some of these meetings and say, look, I've got this new campaign, it's going to deliver another £100 million worth of pipeline. How exciting is that? And John would turn around and his team would turn around and say, yeah, it's not going to do it in my accounts though, where's the interest for me? And this is a real key one for me, working for where sales are. So actually being in bed with the sales team, in the trenches, fighting the battle every day with the salespeople, instead of actually stepping out of the trenches and looking where the battle is going to be in the future and moving forward there so that I'm actually preparing the ground, building the relationships so that the salespeople, when they're ready, can then pick up those relationships and so on and so forth. And again, back to what I used to do, and this was a key opening for me with the whole program, that whereas before I looked at making the agenda look pretty, and a specific example of this, I was sent an agenda by John to look at and to just polish as normal. And I looked at the objectives of the event and I went, these two are just chalk and cheese. There is no correlation between what's being asked here. So I phoned up the salespeople and said, look, what do you think? Got stonewalled, no responses, no feedback whatsoever. So I thought, I'll go to the customer. So I sat down on the phone with the customer and said, we want to talk to you about this stuff. I think we can do better. What do you think? And they said, yeah, well, we'd love to hear from this. We'd love to hear about that. This will really help our understanding. So I rewrote the agenda. I got some new people to come in and basically sent the agenda back to the sales team, who freaked out and then said, what the hell are you doing? And I said, explained why we were doing it. They went, okay, fair enough. The big problem you've got now, though, is we haven't got people to actually talk about some of these presentations that you've got. So I said, well, I'll do it. I know the capabilities, I know the solutions, I'm more than capable of presenting this stuff. So instead of actually polishing the slide presentation, I was actually putting content in there as well and delivering some of it. And then from that point, I was then sending out the agendas to the team, the customers, and saying, right, so this is what we're doing. I'm Adrian Hardy. I am going to be hosting your day. Okay, so rather than just making sure the sandwiches are right and all the giveaways are done, this was really about focusing on knowing that the event was going to work seamlessly. I was in charge of the timing, taking notes, making sure that the event flowed perfectly so that the salespeople could do their job of actually sitting back away from the organisation and just do their job of selling, engaging, discussing, and being excellent salespeople. And ultimately, that meant what I was doing was not working at the bottom of the sales funnel, but I was actually moving myself up the sales funnel to be more productive and much more from field-based into account-based. And after a year of doing this, I had this lovely email from John that basically said, congratulations, Adrian, we don't call you the colouring in department anymore, we now call you the lighting up department. So that felt like success to me. And there's a really hard message in this. We talk a lot about the ABMer being the CMO in the organisation, in an account. It's very true, but if we are going to be a CMO in the account, we have to act like it. We have to actually take the initiative. We have to act with the tools that we've got to actually make a difference in those accounts. Otherwise, we won't be taken seriously. So, in summary, I just wanted to... these things are in no particular order, and some are big things, some are small things, but in general, these are the sort of 15 things, if you like, that I've really focused on, and I'm working with my new ABM team to say, you know, this is some stuff to focus on to make you successful. And I've just picked out a few of those in little clusters to actually work through, and we'll have a look at those now. So, working with the sales team. A really good idea, if you're going from account to account, and this is based on what I've heard a number of people saying, you know, how do you get traction with the organisations, with the teams? How do you get your foot in the door? The best thing you can do is to start with a recommendation from somewhere that you've already worked. Yeah, get them to write you an email, outline the idea that you've got on your behalf, and show some examples of where you've been successful with them. It's a great introduction. Go prepared. Be on time, keep on time. You know, this is it's a really important thing for me to do. But you know, make an hour, write the agenda, and for me, definitely, I'll say, yeah, I can cover that entire topic in 5 minutes, and there's 15 things in the agenda. It's going to be great. So what I do is I half that, and probably half it again, and then double the amount of time for each of those agenda items, and leave plenty of question time. Because if you don't, you're just going to be rattling on at them, showing them slides, they'll switch off. Communication in this question and answer phase is an indication that you're having success. Start small. One quick example I want to give you, the same account where I actually ended up running the event for them. Prior to that, John sent me an email and said, look, we've got this massive, massive £250 million global wide area network contract. I've sent it through to you. can you look at the management summary? Now, this document is 400 and something pages thick, and there was a 26-page executive summary, management summary on the front of it. 26 pages. And John said to me, look, you need to look through this, it's rubbish. It's been written by about 15 different people, the grammar's wrong, it doesn't, it's rubbish, can you make it make sense? Can you polish it? So I spent a good few hours making it make sense, putting it in the same grammatical constructs and all that sort of good stuff that we do as marketeers. And I looked at this and said, it doesn't say anything. It basically is just a summary of 400 pages. It's about as emotional as a cabbage. It's about as inspiring as a cabbage. It just doesn't actually do the thing to actually say to the customer, read this, this is why you need to now study the 480 pages that are behind this summary. So I threw it away. I started from scratch. And I started talking about the emotional connection that BT had with this organisation, the similarities that we had engineers working in the weirdest places in the world, in sometimes quite terrifying places, and that they were far away from their family and friends, and that having a communication infrastructure that joined them together, made them agile, made them part of a team, was such a powerful thing for that organisation. Got it down to 3 pages. John said it was the best management summary he'd ever read. The customer loved it, and they actually read the rest of the documentation. Unfortunately, we didn't win that deal, but it did give us, because they said we really didn't realise quite how passionate you were as an organisation. BT is big and ugly and square and no sort of passion or no sort of passion or emotion behind you at all. And this has really opened us up to some other ideas. Can we talk to you about X, Y, and Z? Okay, so that was the starting small, aiming for a small, solid thing I could deliver, and that gave me the sort of introduction, the door opening, if you like, to then work on the deeper programme. One thing I just wanted to... Sorry, I've just recovered from a cold, so my voice is about to go, I think, so I'm going to need to be really quick, otherwise it's just going to be flashing the last few slides through. And so scarcity is really key. Don't think that you have to go out there and do ABM programmes for 800 accounts. You're not going to get the traction with some of them. And in fact, if you provide your services in scarcity, you'll get better traction, you'll get better feedback and better results. So onto the building the plan. Obviously, a core thing here is understanding the use of the financial terms that sales use. If they are talking about profit, don't go in there and talk about revenue and pipeline generation, because, again, you're not going to meet in the middle. Qualify their involvement. This is so important. If you go and say, look, I've got this fabulous plan, it's going to bring in all these numbers, it's going to be absolutely great, and then you don't tell them that it's actually going to require that team comes on a call twice a week for the next 6 months and does this sort of stuff, then they're going to get to that point and go, oh, I didn't realise I had to work for this thing. It's going to fail spectacularly. Develop the plan together. Go with a straw man and don't be precious about it being ripped apart and turned into something completely different. It's really important that you go with an open mind there. And once you've got that plan, once you've got that plan, put it on their account development plan. Don't keep it on a spreadsheet in your laptop where no one else can see it. Make sure it's embedded in the system that they use. Because, and this is another point about sharing with senior management, when you do that, the senior management go, oh, that's interesting. So I can see that this account has got a gap of £100 million worth of pipeline, and I can now see 10 things that are going to actually get stepwise through that. If then people start dropping the ball in the sales side and saying, oh, we haven't got time to do this, it's not going to work for us, then senior management are going to come down on them first of all and say, well, why aren't you? Because this is the plan. So you've got management support behind you to make these things happen. Excuse me. But, again, back to the scarcity thing. If they're not playing ball, walk away. You have permission to literally turn around and say, look, I've got other people who want to work with our ABM team. I now reserve the right to actually say, contract is broken, I'm now going to go over here and start working with these teams. Word will get around that you're doing those things, and people will be very much more interested in working with you and committing up front to delivering their side of the bargain. Obvious statement, I'm sure we've heard it in many ways before. Any ABM plan which is built without the sales involvement will fail. Keep that in mind. It's a really obvious thing to say, but, print it out, stick it on your wall, and just make sure you actually look at that every day, because it really is important. So the last thing, delivering the plan to closure. Out of this thing, one of the most important things To get connection with the sales team is to train together. You're going to be creating new propositions, capabilities, or pulling, security is one of the nasty ones for us. We all hate it. There are some specialists in BT who are absolutely amazing at security. They talk to people who are incredibly good at security. Salespeople are terrified of it. So when you go and do the training with them, you get the experience of that. You get the feeling of what it's actually like to receive the information. You're working together. You can feed back into your organisation and say, excuse me, this could be done better. This needs to look a bit more like that. You're not just throwing things over the fence for sales to do. Deliver consistently. Again, out of that, if you haven't done a project management course before, I really recommend you actually do it, because the success of an ABM plan really is on time-wise and effective delivery of that plan. And finally, showcase success. Use your internal communications channels, but ask sales to do it. And don't just wait for the big bang at the end when you've actually, excuse me, when you've won the contract. All the little steps in the way, that meeting with 10 clients up the BT tower, where you've got a photograph of everyone standing around chairs with a glass of wine, publish that and say, look what we've done. Our desired outcome for this thing. It's not just an event, oh, look, we've got 15 people along to it, thumbs up. It's, we had a conversation. We needed to get the client from here to here. We've done that. They've agreed to the next step. That sort of stepwise approach to actually, again, generating excitement in what you do and more demand for your services. And finally, when you do get the win, get the salespeople to promote that win for you. So rather than you pushing the message out, get John, as John has done in the past for me, saying, it was great working with Adrian. We've brought this thing home. This is really successful. It's been a great thing to work with. Now, unfortunately, John then got me as an asset and he wouldn't let me go anywhere else, so it was a bit of a moot point. But, and interestingly, then the loop back, sorry, I'm really losing my voice now. The loop back is that then that person is the person who is then going to be your next recommendation for when you move on to your next account or account team. So I just want to leave you with one final thought, and that's something that Jay Abraham said, and that is that, in fact, everyone is in sales. And I really want that to sit with you, because more than anything else, though we're in marketing, we are still selling things to salespeople. It's just we have different audiences, different commodities that we're selling, but at the end of the day, we're all in sales together. Stick with that in mind, and you won't go far wrong. Thank you very much.